Thank you, Rebecca. I'm really excited to be with you all today talking about decoding the language of devs, which is essentially how can we speak with developers? How do we work better with developers? Especially as SEOs, there can be a lot of communication issues and things that just basically don't happen, especially when you have tech tickets. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I am a freelance technical SEO consultant. I also run my own company at techseoaudits.com, and I have the pleasure of working with Journey Further as their technical SEO manager. So this is, one of the big questions that I think we all encounter. As I talked about, it's how we communicate with devs and the struggles that we come up against. And this is one of the key questions that I will be covering today. And it's a key part of our jobs, especially in technical SEO. At some point in our careers, we will find the point, or often several points, as in my case, where we have to communicate with developers, and you can often come up against blockers. But what we need to do with that communication is make sure that we know how to do it well. And we do that by making sure that we have alignment on the KPIs. That's the first thing that you need to do. What are the goals that your developers and the tech team that you're speaking to, what are they measured on, and how can you help them to do their job? It's also really important to have regular communication, as without it, you can have even more delays and poor results for everyone involved. But the goal in all of this, and for us to work effectively with developers, is to be able to create workflows or processes that drive mutual success so we can get those all-important tech SEO tickets implemented. But it's not always that easy, right? If that was my whole talk and that was it, then it would be a very short day. But this is what we're going to cover off in more detail and talk about how we can do all of those things and drive success for everybody. This is an interesting statistic that I came across from the SEO FOMO study by a leader. And that was shared the results that said most technical SEO recommendations take 4 to 6 weeks to get implemented. In my experience, that's quite quick. I wish mine only took 4 to 6 weeks. I've got some that I've been working on since January and they're still sat in the queue. But they're moving now because I've been able to implement a lot of these recommendations that I'm talking about today. And another statistic from the same talk, from the same survey, is that most SEOs only see 40 to 60% of their technical SEO recommendations implemented. One of the most common reasons that it came across that there's very little implementation from the recommendations is because of these barriers that stop teams being able to collaborate effectively. And what I found to be the most common reason for that is that we're speaking different languages. And I don't mean French and English. What I mean is that SEOs have a reputation for talking in marketing jargon, whereas developers are talking in more technical terms. And we need to be able to find that common ground and have that clear communication without overly technical terms, without this jargon that nobody really understands or doesn't even mean anything in some cases. Set up almost, this dialogue so that, when I say this is what I mean, or you can even agree on certain terms that you're going to not use because people just don't understand them. And that's something that I found to work really well. Another barrier is that the priorities are not aligned across the various teams. It could be that while one team is prioritizing the speed of implementation, they just want to get things through the tech queue, the dev queue as quickly as possible, whereas another, perhaps the developers, are making sure that things are technically sound. They want things to be absolutely perfect. And if you're not aligned on those priorities, then essentially nothing's going to get done and you're just going to keep hitting up against those same blockers. Which leads me on to the next point of technical backlogs and lack of time to do any of this. And this is because developers often have really overloaded schedules with huge backlogs of work. They have certain KPIs that, like we talked about, that they're measured on. And if you come along with your SEO tickets that don't meet these KPIs and don't speak the language that they understand, then they're going to have no interest in your tickets, and they're not going to put any time aside to work on your tickets. You know, what about your technical SEO tickets would make them take a look and add them to their already huge backlog? And these are the things that we need to highlight. And this is exactly what we're going to be talking about in this session. So I've talked about the first one already, but the key to this process of getting good developer communication is using simple and precise language that doesn't use any jargon. It's also important to not over-explain the solution, and I'll talk about this in a few slides, but I see a lot of the time when people write huge documentations, explaining it in way too much detail that you probably wouldn't want to read yourself, let alone a developer who's already facing the challenges that we've just covered. You need to make sure that you get straight to the point, explain what it is that you want, and only include what is necessary. The other key is to avoid making any assumptions. If you are going to use any jargon or terminology or even abbreviations, we talked about KPIs, be clear on what KPI stands for. It's key performance indicators, but if you're going to use any of these, make sure you explain it in the documentations that you have. Be specific in what it is that you're asking for and what you want the outcomes to be. And if you can show examples of the issue, what is it that you're coming up against? And also, what do you want it to look like? What does good look like? Maybe you've seen something in a blog or an article, or maybe you've seen an example from a competitor site. Show them what good looks like so they know what they're trying to achieve. There's also a key point here, which is showing them how to replicate the issue. If you're saying this button is broken, you need to show them exactly where that button is, how to get to it. What are you trying to do? Where should that button lead to? Why is it broken? And include all these extra levels of detail that might seem over-explainy. It might seem redundant, but by doing that, you're avoiding the assumptions and giving them exactly what they need and making sure that there's no room for any confusion in the middle. And also we need to focus on the why. This is what's going to be key to getting your tickets into that dev queue and start getting them prioritized. Emphasize the business impact. What will the business or the client achieve by working on your issue? I've got a little bit of detail about this in later slides, but it's not always by fixing this, you will achieve this amount of money. It could be that by fixing this, you're less likely to lose this amount of money. I call that the revenue at risk. And that's something that I've found to be really influential in my tech tickets. But either way, including a monetary value on your tech tickets is really motivational, especially if that's a big number. Suddenly things start to move quite quickly. Don't tell the developers how to do their job. This is really important. You might know what you want as an SEO, but it's unlikely that you're going to know how the really technical intricacies of the website work. Don't tell them how to do their job. Tell them what you want to achieve, and they will figure out the middle bits and how to get there, and then you can agree on what needs to be done to get to that point. And be clear on your priorities. If you have access to the full backlog that they have, then you can see where you think your ticket should fit within that. You can explain why, or if not, if you want to have access to your list of tickets, be clear on what you consider to be SEO priority 1, 2, and 3, and so on. But how can we do that? How can we set these priorities? Again, to emphasize this same point, we don't want to tell the developers what to do. But what we are going to do is be transparent in your priority order. One of the ways that I do this is through the revenue values that we spoke about. And in the case of revenue at risk, the item that has the risk of losing the most amount of money if we don't fix it would go at priority 1. And then priority 2 would be the next highest amount of money, and so on. And I use calculators to do this. I make it very transparent in how I'm doing it. And I share that data with them. They have access to this same calculator as well. So they can replicate the numbers that I'm generating, and they can use the calculator themselves if that's what they need to do. And this works for me and my clients because we've agreed that that's how we're going to do it. They understand the process. They understand how we've got to that goal. And by all of us having access to this and knowing what it is that we're trying to achieve, we can get there together, and we've agreed on that. And it works really well. Another way that we can prioritize is using the red, amber, green system. I do use this in my audits, and I'll have like a group of issues, maybe like 3 to 5 issues that are classified as red, but then I'll have, red 1, red 2, and so on. But then that doesn't work for all clients. It's about finding what works for the people that you're working with. What we find is items that are red are those that are classed as being critical or severe. These are high severity issues that are likely to pose significant risks to the site functionality or the performance, and therefore they require immediate attention. Amber items, again, you can have several items here. This is probably a much larger section than your red items. And these are medium priority issues that do impact the site, but they're less urgent. They might have more manageable risks that do need to be addressed, but they can be addressed in the near future after you've addressed the most critical issues. And green is probably a similar sort of size to the amber section, or it could even be much larger depending on the type of site that you're working on. But these are low severity issues. They might be minor items that have minimal impact on the site performance, and they're things that can be resolved when resources become available. These are basically the nice to haves. There might be little niggles that are not actually affecting SEO performance. They're not affecting revenue and all this sort of stuff. But classifying them in this way and having a very clear key helps people understand why they're placed where they are in the priority order as well. Using a priority matrix is also really useful. It helps to cover all tasks and teams. It's something that ties in with SEO, wider marketing, and the business in general. I've included some examples here that you can see in the chart, and this is how you might want to classify these different issues. You can, lay them out however you want, but this is what I find to work really quite well across a broad range of clients. You can have the high impact, low effort items. These are things that are strategic opportunities, things like issues with the XML sitemap and the canonicals, metadata optimization for key revenue driving pages, and things like that. You might also have your quick wins and optimizations. So these are like the HTML sitemap, optimizing the robots.txt, ensuring that 404s are being handled correctly and that breadcrumbs are clear. There's also items such as your long-term and ongoing plans. These are items like template optimization, ensuring a smooth mobile experience, addressing instances of content duplication, and JavaScript rendering as well. And then finally, you can have items that would fall into your refinements and low priority sections. These are things that would basically be the green items that we just talked about on that previous screen. So with these, when resources available, we're going to be looking at blog improvements, looking at the nav and the taxonomy, opportunities in local SEO, and also making sure that there's a comprehensive product retirement strategy that everyone is able to adhere to. And revenue is a big motivator. This is what I was talking about a few slides ago with the revenue at risk. And this is essentially how I found to work really well. I've had to anonymize the data here, of course, but this is a replica of a table that I've used in one of my recent audits and in conversations with their developers. So I was able to use the calculator that I've spoken about, which is just a Google Sheet calculator with the key metrics in there in terms of average order value, traffic, and all of that sort of stuff that we already have access to in analytics and Search Console. And I bring that all together to be able to calculate the revenue per issue that they risk losing by not implementing the fixes that we recommend. So what we've classed here as high, these are the red items in the RAG. So you can see I've got issues 1, 2, and 3, and was able to calculate that by not fixing issue number 1, they stand to risk £200,000 per year. You can also do it per month or per year, whatever works best for you, and then so on and so forth. So we've got issue number 6, which was classed as medium priority. By not fixing that, they stand to risk £45,000. So, still a substantial amount of money, but not as big as those high priority items. And then once we have that, everyone was clear on what they need to do, why, and when, essentially. And you can do different versions of this and forecast for different scenarios. It doesn't have to be the revenue at risk. As long as you're including some sort of monetary value, it's something that people understand. Whatever language you're speaking, whether it's German, French, English, technical, non-technical, everyone understands money. And what I did with this client is we forecasted a couple of different scenarios. And you can see in the table is a snapshot of how we got to this data. But we looked at the potential earnings in the conservative column, the potential earnings that the client could get by improving by an average of 3 positions. So we're saying if they fix this issue, we conservatively can say that they'll improve by 3 positions, which would lead to this much increased non-brand clicks and this much increased non-brand revenue. And then we did the same for an optimistic view, which was looking at an average improvement of 5 positions. And then obviously that was a greater number of non-brand clicks and a greater amount of revenue that they would stand to gain. So whichever way you do it, whether you're looking at the improvements that they could gain or the savings that they will make, basically the money that they won't lose, either way, make sure you're including that monetary data in there. Issues are common. We've talked about this, communication issues, but it also comes down to a lot of workflow issues. And a lot of this is because there just is no clear communication. People don't know how to speak to the relevant people. They don't have access to them. So you might have a long list of tech SEO tickets that you need to get through, and they're going, the developers aren't doing anything. But are you actually speaking to the developers? Do you know who they are? Do you know, what they're working on? And if you don't have those lines of communication open, things are not going to happen. Things are going to get more and more delayed, and the problem is only going to get worse. So to combat that, we want to make sure that we have regular touch points and catch-ups, that whether that's on Slack or Microsoft Teams, at least have some sort of chat available. You can also have regular stand-up. So especially if you're working on critical items and there's a big project that you're working on, try and put 15 minutes in the diary every Monday or every 2 weeks, something like that. So at the very least, you're going to be speaking to them then. Prioritize tasks with shared goals. We talked a lot about that. And track your progress openly and with transparency. What I've done on some of my recent ones is when I'm having these catch-ups with the developers, I can gauge how close that ticket is to completion by what stage it's at in the dev queue. And on the spreadsheet that I'm using, I have like a percentage complete column. And I just put the percentage in that, and then use conditional formatting depending on how close it is to being 100% complete. But that's something that, again, everybody understands. It's really transparent. Everybody has access to that spreadsheet, and we can see how close it is to getting it across the line and deployed on the live site. So the key question, the third key question is, how can we speed up tech SEO ticket implementation? And to do that, we need to be able to create clear and actionable tech tickets. And I have a template that I'm going to be sharing at the end of this talk. But essentially, if you include nothing else, you want to make sure that you cover these 3 points. The first being the what, which is the specific ask or the fix that you require. The why, the SEO impact or the KPIs that it will achieve. And the how. This is optional because it depends on the actual issue that you're referring to. But the reason why I say if appropriate is because it comes back to the point of not telling the developers how to do their job. If it's something that's much more technical, don't include the how, but you always include the what and the why. Only if it's appropriate do you include the how, and you'll get to grips with that the more you have these conversations with your developer teams. So what does this look like? Well, first of all, I wanted to make clear what a tech ticket is. And for me, it is a concise and actionable request that clearly outlines the specific task that you want to be completed. It is often logged in a project management system like Jira, Trello, or Asana, usually for a developer to work on. You can see an example on the side there of a basic tech ticket, but it includes what we'd expect to see. We've got like a user story included in there, which is something that's really critical to tech tickets as well. We can also see that a tech ticket might request the implementation of something like a canonical tag on a specific page or a group of pages with the intention to resolve duplicate content issues. So in that case, you would want the ticket regarding canonicals to include the exact URL or URLs, if there's multiple that you're referring to. You want to be clear on what URL, what canonical you want to be used. Why is the change needed? Why is it broken, basically? And any supporting links. So maybe you have documentation from Google or from Oncrawl that explains this is what a canonical is, this is why it's important. Just include the link to that. You don't need to fully explain any of that. Just include the link, and if there's any confusion, the developers can look that up in their own time. But if you've got paragraph and paragraph of that sort of information, they're simply not going to read it. So on that note, what a tech ticket is not, it should not be a long multi-page explanation of SEO elements like canonical tags, how they work, or how search engines interpret them. It is a waste of your time to include any of that. I think it's key with tech tickets to understand that you need to be clear and precise. Think about ensuring that they're actionable, not academic. When I'm creating my tech tickets, I always make sure right at the top I include the page or pages that I'm referring to, the scope of the issue, and also what is out of scope, what's related to this that I don't want you to touch. So it might be something like a canonical, and I'm saying that, yeah, I want you to change the canonical, but I don't want you to change the meta robots tags. I don't want you to touch that at all. Just focus on the rel canonical. I'm going to include information about the purpose of the issue. I'm going to include user stories as well. Sometimes there's more than one, but there should always be at least one. It might be that there's a user story from the perspective of a search engine bot, and depending on the issue that you're talking about, you might have a user story from the perspective of a website customer as well. You want to include the exact steps and how developers can reproduce the issue, any technical specifications that they might need. For example, is it only happening on a MacBook Air that uses the latest version of Chrome, or are you seeing it on a MacBook Air that uses Firefox? Be specific about what it is that you're using when you're experiencing that, because also it could be something that only affects mobile users. Including this information will make the speed of fixes much quicker. Include information on the severity and the priority. So we talked about this with like the red, amber, green, with the revenue figures. That's where this can go in this section here. The success criteria. So what do we need to get to for this ticket to be considered complete? And any KPIs that this will contribute to can also go in this section. And any images of the issue, any screenshots or things like that can also be included at the end as well. Good tickets make a huge difference in speeding up tech implementation. They need to be clear. And by doing that, you eliminate a lot of the back and forth that we often come across. Keep them focused to ensure that they are easy to implement, and include all of the necessary details and the right context so that you're able to start actioning them with the right teams immediately. What we've found in our work, and by sticking to these rules and by creating really clear tech tickets, is that it took 50% less time for developers to implement our tech tickets. There was much less back and forth. They were able to take our tickets and start working immediately, and saving 50% on time, as you can imagine, was a huge amount of time, which meant that we saved money as a company, and so did our clients. And it's made a massive difference in our relationship and in the results that we're able to generate for our clients. And we also found that these good tech tickets that we were able to create, making them clear, meant that they were 70% more likely to be prioritized compared to what they were like before, and also 70% more likely for them to be completed on schedule. What I mean by that is the schedule that we'd set, but also when a developer says it is going to be included in Sprint 2, and that will be released on the 5th of December, for example, yeah, we were able to hit that 70% of the time, and that tied in well with our deadlines and with things like Black Friday and Christmas sales, because we know when those sales are going to happen. So we plan our roadmap, months in advance, and we get the right tickets and the right sprints when we need them to be. And this meant that we had the right fixes in place for peak seasons, basically. Working closely with devs, how important is it? We've covered a lot of this today, talking about how much it speed things up. But essentially, as technical SEOs, it's our job. It's our job to fix issues and make sites work better, make them work faster. And we do that a lot of the time, especially when we're working with big websites, by working closely with the tech teams, with the developers. Before we implemented these methods I've been talking about today, we found that our tickets were vague, with unclear objectives, and just really didn't include enough detail. Developers had to follow up for clarification, and there was often multiple versions that were required, a lot of back and forth. Can you provide this? What does this mean? How do I find this information? Whereas now, everything is clear from the start. The changes align with the team goals, they align with the client goals as well, and also the wider business goals is clear. And The fixes are also implemented in the first iteration, which all in all brings it back to having a reduced total workload. We have accelerated project timelines and smoother collaboration between everybody involved. I want you to remember that communication is always a two-way street. It's not on the developers to come back to you and chase you saying, do you have more tickets for me to work on? You need to go to them with your request, and then they will come back to you with any questions that they have. Building trust is a key one, and that is what we can achieve with good tickets, and we can all achieve shared wins as a result. So coming back to the things that we wanted to achieve at the start of this presentation, for us to be able to decode the language of devs, we need to understand what matters to them, what motivates them to do their job, and what tickets do they generally focus on and why. Once we do all of that and we use the steps that we've covered, we're then able to nail down these processes. We can work with them quicker, we're more productive, and there's a lot less headaches as well. Our job becomes a lot less stressful and more enjoyable. If you scan that QR code or go to that link, you can get access to a more detailed template that you can use for your own tech tickets. And there's also some example images on there as well that you can take away. And feel free to let me know if you have any questions or issues with any of that. I hope you found it useful. It's definitely been a game changer for us and for other people that I've worked with. But that's me. We've got through this quite quickly. But yeah, feel free to get in touch, and I'd love to talk about how we can help get tech tickets implemented faster. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. That was excellent. I've found that that's a really critical element for technical SEO as well, particularly since with technical SEO, you're looking at how the website is built, how it is structured, and how different other elements interact with that. So it's often not something, depending on the website, that you can actually do yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And some of the points, they seem quite standard, but they're things that can often be missed, especially when you're working with really large sites, multi-million-pound businesses that have lots of moving parts. These are often the things that start to fall by the wayside first. So getting back to those and being, clear on a lot of these points is actually what you need to get things moving again.
Absolutely. And as Nikki said, we would like to open the floor up for questions. So those of you who haven't already put a question in the question box, there's a little button for it at the bottom of the screen. We'll get to those in just a second. The first question that we do have here is something that Modestas Mika asked. Why do search engines index certain 404 pages, even though they have no internal or external links? How do they reach them?
It could be for several reasons. It could be when the page started to return a 404 status code. Perhaps it was a recent change. So just because the status code changes to a 404 doesn't mean that it's immediately dropped from Google's index. And also looking at, well, you said there's no external links. I was going to say looking at external sites that did link to them. But it might have been one that linked to the page previously. It no longer links to that page for whatever reason, but Google knows about it because it previously found it through this page. If you have an example of, any of these 404 pages that you're seeing, I'd love to see them. Feel free to drop me a message on social media with these, and I could dig into it a bit further. But it will have been included somewhere for it to be accessed. Perhaps it's used in a canonical, or it's in the sitemap or something like that.
Sometimes that can be just for a few days or a few minutes, and it's already too late.
Yeah.
We have another question. Is there a certain element of SEO evangelization that plays a part in communicating with devs?
I'm not sure what you mean by SEO evangelization, to be honest. I'm not sure. Do you know what that means, Rebecca?
If I were going to take a shot at that, I think I'd say communicating the importance of SEO to people who don't work in SEO.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Is there a certain level of that plays into a part? Yeah, but that comes into talking about the why of the ticket and the KPIs. You know, if you're going to say doing this is better for crawling, therefore it's better for organic performance, the developer's probably not going to care about crawling because they're not measured on crawling. You can include all of that in your reporting because that's what you're measured on. But in terms of speaking with the devs, you're talking about things that they're measured on. So they're probably measured on things like the number of tickets they get through or how much revenue they're able to generate for the business. And if you can align it more to those, then you'll have much more success.
That makes perfect sense to me. Melissa has a second question about, have you dealt with issues where a Google Search Console crawl file bolds part of the text without any HTML tag being present in that place? I'm not sure if I follow that one. Let me... So...
Have you dealt with an issue where Google Search Console bolds parts of the text?
I've seen Google sometimes shows bolded sections of the text, even though there's not a specific link to that. But I'm not sure if that's I think the best thing to do would be to provide an example. You mentioned your ways to reach you. I know on the slide at the moment that's showing on the screen that I just minimized slightly, there is a Let's Connect button, so feel free to scan that if you want. Otherwise, the link is in the chat now, so feel free to click on that so that you have a quick link to LinkedIn, Blue Sky, and other places to find Nikki.
Thank you. Yeah, and if I go back as well, you've got access to the speaker deck as well as the resources that I've included as well.
I know you mentioned a calculator earlier. Mm-hmm. Is that in there as well?
It isn't, but it can be. That's a good point. I can certainly add that later today. So if you visit the link in about an hour or two, I'll make sure that there's a version of that calculator in there that you can access as well.
Excellent, because that was definitely something I was going to look up. I know I've mentioned before that I often work on websites that don't have a direct link to a clear revenue value. And I was wondering if you had any tips onto how to calculate what money you might be missing out on if you're not, say, an e-commerce or a news website where it's a very clear link between what the traffic is and what your revenue from that page is.
Yeah, I've had to do it recently with a website that we have as a client. So they're like a news website, but in the financial industry. They're basically providing advice on investments, basically, and that sort of thing. So there's not like an average order value that we would expect with e-com, but they do have a subscription service. So I was able to use that in this case. So there's, when they have one price for their subscription, so I know that if there is a conversion, it is always that same price. But you can also speak to them about finding a way with the stakeholders at your client about what a conversion is worth, depending on what their conversion is. What are they trying to achieve as a business? If they're not selling anything, is it people on the page? Maybe they make money through ad revenue. Are they looking to get people to sign up to their newsletter? Or whatever the case may be. There'll be conversations you can have to work out how much those things are worth, and those are the values that you can enter in your calculators or however you're working it out. When I'm working on e-com clients, the metrics that I use are things like users and clicks. I work out what the annual click-through rate is as well. I also use the total search volume of the keywords that we're tracking. Conversion rate, or depending on analytics and what sort of client you're working on, it might be the key event rate and your average order value. And I can share this in the calculator later today. But what I do is I bring that all together and make a small number of calculations that are automatically done for me now with formulas. And then that gives me the two outputs that I want. So that's the revenue at risk per month and the revenue at risk per year. What I've found as well to be a really important element of this is if you're working on a tech audit, and we've prioritized it, as we say, item 1, item 2, etc. You know that item 1 is going to have a higher weighting than item 6. So I turn those into percentages, and it's difficult to explain without being able to share my screen and without being able to show you the calculator. But hopefully when you see this later, it'll make a lot more sense. But I'll take the revenue data and basically multiply it by that weighting percentage. And that's given us, a more accurate number as well, rather than just giving a general revenue at risk figure. We've got the figure specifically weighted for issue number 1, weighted for issue number 6, and so on.
Okay. That reminds me of something Crystal Carter had said earlier today about how money is the KPI that works the best, because what you want ultimately is for your clients to make more money so that you can make more money.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's why I spoke about it a lot today. It doesn't matter what language you're speaking, everybody understands money. And like I say, whether it's a technical language or non-technical or literally French, Spanish, English, everybody understands money.
Thank you very much. We're going to wrap up our session today with that. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation. And thanks again for this great talk, Nikki. If you're still interested in following along, there will be a panel session coming up next in about 15 minutes. It will be on AI and search. Where do we stand? Is it important? And we'll have Andreas Moniatis, Corentin Mirand, Kevin Indig, and Sipai Wang-Bei joining us there. So once again, thank you very much, Nikki. I think working with devs to get anything done, because SEO is only going to be as effective as your ability to implement things, is one of the key topics for today. Thank you very much, and see everyone soon.